For those looking to start playing the Pokemon trading card game competitively, League Battle decks are the best. They are pre-constructed products officially released by the Pokemon Company that give you a competitive deck out of the box. And in this video, we're going to go over the League Battle deck options that are in the market right now, and I'll give you my thoughts on the pros and cons of each and my recommendations on which ones to buy. I'm Jet from inthirdperson.com. Make sure to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and let's talk League Battle decks. Let's start things off with the League Battle decks you probably shouldn't buy. The Pokemon trading card game is played in what is called the standard format, where only the newest last few years of cards are legal for tournament play. And all of the decks you'll see here are, on this particular screen, are no longer legal in standard format play. So if you still want to play these decks in expanded, which allows for more older cards to be used, that's fine, go nuts. But none of these decks you could buy and then just go to a local tournament for the most part, because everything is being played in standard format right now. I think in particular, the one to keep your eye out on is Mew VMAX, where it's a deck that won the World Championships in 2023. It's an incredibly popular Pokemon. It's an incredibly strong deck. Mew VMAX is my all-time favorite deck. But if you're looking to play the Pokemon trading card game in standard format, whether you're playing at the World Championships or you just want to go to a store and play, you're not going to be able to use any of these as a starting deck. So I would ignore these ones for the time being. Now let's move on to the oldest League Battle deck. This is Palkia VSTAR, and Palkia VSTAR is an incredibly strong attacker where for only 2 energy you could do upwards of 260 damage depending on how many Pokemon are on your bench and your opponent's bench. And if you've got a choice belt on, you can hit Pokemon V for up to 290 damage, and you're pretty much knocking out every basic V and almost every V-Star as well. And because of its Star Portal ability, you can accelerate energy faster than most other decks, and you can power up another Palkia to attack on a future turn, or you could power up Radiant Greninja for a really cool snipe attack. Palkia is actually in a unique spot where it's been a deck that has been on the competitive fringes for some time now, but it's making a triumphant comeback in Stellar Crown as some new cards make the deck arguably stronger than ever. Remember that 260 damage cap that I talked about earlier? Well, with the new Area Zero Underdepth Stadium, Palkia can potentially hit for up to 380 damage, which should one-hit KO pretty much anything in the game under most circumstances. And for only 2 energy, that is absolutely incredible. Palkia is also a really strong deck as a foundational piece. Like if you're buying, or if you want to build something like Goldengo EX or Chen Pao, you are getting a lot of good cards that can go into those decks with Palkia. So you've got yourself, like, you can build a Palkia deck and then kind of use those pieces for other decks as well. Palkia is just one of the most versatile Pokemon in the game in that it's a very strong attacker, and it's also great accelerating water energy, and then it plays great out of the box. It is one of the easier League Battle decks to play without any upgrades, and when you fully upgrade it, even then it's still on the easier side to play, because really you're just slapping 2 energy on Palkia and then slamming attacks over and over again, and maybe you get a snipe attack here and there, which is pretty cool. The downsides for Palkia are pretty glaring though. For one, it already lost some cards to the 2024 rotation. Cards like Echoing Horn, Battle VIP Pass, Clara, and Melanie are no longer legal in competitive play in the standard format, so you're going to have to replace those cards right away. But on top of that, right now, if you want to build a meta-relevant Palkia VSTAR deck, you're going to need a lot of cards that currently aren't in the deck. We're talking 30-ish cards, so half the deck of the League Battle deck you're going to have to replace entirely. And now I need to preface this that all of these decks are going to need some upgrades in order to get them to their absolute limit, but Palkia is going to be on the higher side of decks that need work. It doesn't come with an A-Spec card, which is a one of, you'll see them, it has the pink border. It is a card that is either a item or a tool or a special energy that can really impact the game. Every competitive deck in standard format has one now. The League Battle deck doesn't come with one out of the box. And the most glaring thing about Palkia VSTAR is that Palkia VSTAR, Palkia V, Bibarel, and Greninja all rotate in March/April of 2025, making this deck unplayable in the standard format beyond that point. So for most people who just play standard format, this deck is only going to be legal for a couple of months, at which point it goes away. And for some people who want a deck that's going to last longer than a couple of months, this may not be the deck choice for you. Here's an example of a competitive Palkia build in the Stellar Crown format. Got this one from Japan, and we see a 3/3 Palkia line along with a bunch of Terra EXs here, like the Ogre Pawns. We see Iron Valiant, Pheasantipity. So there's a lot of changes that are happening here, with the most important one being 3 copies of the Area 0 Stadium all the way down here. And again, with the Palkia VSTAR and 8 Pokemon on both benches, you're swinging for 380 damage, and you can make that even higher with the Iron Valiant here, dropping damage counters as you go. So this is a deck like this is going to be the way that Palkia is played going forward. Here's another example. This one is with Terapagos EX, and we have Terapagos as a secondary attacker. We still have that Area 0 Stadium because we want to fill both benches with 8 Pokemon, so we're swinging for maximum damage. And then this last example is a Goldengo with Palkia build. It's got the 1/1 Palkia with the Greninja. All of this comes in the League Battle deck, at least these 3 Pokemon, as well as the Iridas and Boss's Orders, and the Water Energy as well. So you've got a lot of good pieces from the Palkia VSTAR League Battle deck that could go into a Goldengo deck. I'm going to list some reasons to buy or pass. I think that some of these are more worth buying than others, and I'll rank them at the end, but I don't want to necessarily say just don't buy this deck, because there are reasons for buying decks. There are reasons for not buying decks. So I want to give you the information, and you can make that decision for yourself. I think that if you want to play the Area 0 based builds of Palkia VSTAR that swing for 1 billion damage, then yeah, maybe buying this League Battle deck is going to be the right choice. We'll get a lot of those foundational pieces right out of the box. If you want to build something like a Chien-Pao EX or a Goldengo EX or any other deck that has Palkia and Greninja in it, this could be a good buy as well. If you want a smooth playing deck that doesn't need a lot of upgrading for casual play, right? You just want to buy this box and then play, and you're not necessarily worried about formats. I think Palkia is a really smooth deck to play out of the box. So I really like it in that regard. However, its flaws are pretty glaring. If you want to make this competitive right now in the 2024 season, you're going to need a lot of cards to make this deck work in a competitive format right now. And if you want a deck that survives March and April of 2025, this is not going to be the deck for you. This is going to move, that's going to rotate out of standard, and you can only play it in expanded format. So that's going to be a deal breaker for a lot of people, and I totally understand if that is enough for you to say like, nah, I'm good with that. That being said, there are going to be people who really want to play Palkia, and they're fine with having this deck work for only a couple of months. Maybe you'll win a couple tournaments. Maybe you'll win like an international championships between November or between now and March or April of 2025, at which point paying the $29.99 US for a deck that goes away in a couple of months is totally worth it. So I'll leave that decision up to you. Next up is the Miraidon League Battle deck. Miraidon is a awesome Pokemon. I think Miraidon's my favorite Scarlet and Violet deck to play, where it's got that Tandem Unit ability, which helps you put lightning Pokemon on the bench very quickly. It has a decent attack as well. 2 lightning and a colorless does 220 damage. And then having the Regieleki VMAXs on the board makes it hit even harder. If you've got 2 Regieleki VMAX in play, Miraidon can swing for up to 280 damage. And one of the big benefits of this deck is that turn 1 going second, Miraidon can actually attack on the first turn for 220 damage, which is enough to knock out basic V Pokemon and a lot of basic EXs as well. So you could potentially end the game on the first turn with a build like this. Of the 4 League Battle decks that we're going to cover today, and all of the League Battle decks that you'll readily see available in stores, Miraidon's the easiest one of these to play, right? You get Miraidon on the board, you throw down a bunch of lightning Pokemon with that ability, you play a couple electric generators, and if you hit on those, then you just smash whatever's in the active, and that's kind of the game plan for the whole thing. It's also the fastest of the 4 League Battle decks to play. You're not worrying too much about evolutions. Yeah, you have to evolve to Regieleki VMAX, but the core of it is Miraidon and attacking with that big attack. Now, also, Miraidon is just the backbone of almost every lightning-based deck. Like, it's just such a good setup Pokemon that whatever lightning deck you're building is probably going to have Miraidon in it. And fully upgraded Miraidon decks just continue to defy the odds, right? During a time when people were kind of sleeping on Miraidon in 2023, it got top 32 thanks to Andrew Mahone, aka Tricky Jim, playing Miraidon and kind of showing the way of how Miraidon could be played at that time. And most recently at the 2024 World Championships, where Miraidon is kind of seen like a B-ish tier deck, Miraidon got 3rd place. Well, shout outs to Jesse Parker for that amazing performance. And regardless of changes in the meta and rotation and all that, I suspect that Miraidon is going to be a deck that continues to punch above its weight and defy expectations. I don't necessarily see it as being a top tier deck or the best deck in the game, but I think it's always going to be a good deck while it is around. As I said earlier, Miraidon is my favorite Scarlet and Violet era deck, but I have some major issues with the League Battle deck. And the big one is it's missing a lot of key Pokemon, right? You're missing Raikou V, Iron Hands, Raichu, Blood Moon, Ursaluna, and now some builds aren't running Raichu anymore, but just pretty much all of its attack partners are not in the deck, and then a lot of its support Pokemon aren't in here either. You're not getting Mew EX, Squawkabilly, Radiant Greninja, Fezandipity. You're going to have to make a ton of upgrades to this deck if you really want it to be truly competitive. And they're not necessarily cheap either, right? Iron Hands is one of the more expensive Pokemon. You're going to need multiple copies of that. Fezandipity at the time of this recording isn't necessarily the cheapest either. So there's definitely some work you're going to have to put in, and arguably the most work. Like Miraidon and Palkia are probably the decks you're going to need to do the most upgrades for in order to make them competitive. Miraidon also has some issues with consistency. I think at its core, you really need to get lucky with the electric generators, and when you don't hit the electric generators, the deck flops pretty hard. There is a card, Magneton from Surging Sparks, that's coming out in like November of 2024 that might help fix that problem, but it's still going to be a little bit of a gambling deck. Miraidon at its core is you're trying to run hot early and end the game before your opponent can really play, and the longer the match goes, you're going to struggle. And if you don't hit those electric generators early, you're probably going to have a bad time. And another factor here is that this one doesn't come with an A-Spec card either. So same with Palkia, that doesn't come with that A-Spec card, which is really unfortunate because Palkia or Miraidon really wants Prime Catcher. I mean, there could be some other A-Spec cards that work here as well, but Prime Catcher is the go-to A-Spec card for Miraidon, and it's actually about as expensive as the deck itself, at least at this point in time. Miraidon's losing some cards to rotation as well, but it's not getting hit nearly as bad as Palkia. You are losing all of the Regieleki cards in the deck, which isn't actually that big of a deal because most competitive Miraidon builds aren't playing Regieleki anyway. Zeraora sometimes is in Miraidon decks, but not really anymore, as Mew EX kind of fills that function of a free retreater. Bidoof and Bibarel are cards that don't really get played in Miraidon anyway. Leafy Camo Poncho you're only going to use for Regieleki VMAX, and that's going away, so it doesn't really matter. Losing Forest Seal Stone does suck though, right? You're going to have it in the immediate term, but after March, April 2025, Forest Seal Stone's going away, and that does kind of suck for Miraidon because Forest Seal Stone is a great card in this deck. Here's an example of a competitive Miraidon build. This is actually Jesse Parker's 3rd place list from the World Championships. And you can see the Miraidons in here, the Arven, the electric generators, all that energy, the Forest Seal Stone. But there's a lot of cards in this list that aren't in the League Battle deck. You notice there's no Regielekis in here as well. So there are a number of pieces that you're going to have to add to Miraidon in order to truly make it competitive. Here's another example from Japan, and this one is built in the Stellar Crown meta, where we've got the Area Zero Underdepth Stadium in play, which allows you to get 8 Pokemon on your bench, giving you some extra room for support Pokemon like a Mew EX or a Pheasantipity, while also making Raikou V's attack even more powerful. If both players have 8 Pokemon on their bench, Raikou V actually swings for 340 damage, enough to one-hit KO any Pokemon in the game without any sort of modifier. So this could be the way that Miraidon is played going forward. If you're going to buy the Miraidon League Battle Deck, you're going to benefit from the fact that it's the easiest of the 4 decks to play. You're worrying very little about evolutions, and it is a deck that can attack very quickly, as early as the first turn. So if you like to play aggressively, this is the deck for you. However, it is a deck that is pretty clunky out of the box, especially since you are missing a lot of key cards and a lot of key Pokemon in particular, which is a major sticking point for me with the Miraidon League Battle Deck, because there's a lot of great attackers and support Pokemon that just aren't here. And it's quite possibly the most expensive deck to upgrade here, especially since Iron Hands is still a pretty expensive card at the time of recording. So it's going to take a lot of work to make the Miraidon League Battle Deck a competitive build. But man, is it ever fun to play, and a deck that continues to defy the odds. Another cool benefit to Miraidon, the League Battle Deck, that isn't possible really with the other decks, is that there are other levels of decks that Pokemon puts out, and you actually can pair the Miraidon League Battle Deck with the Zapdos Deluxe Battle Deck. The benefits of mashing these two together is that you get a third Miraidon EX, making your deck more consistent, and you get a one-of Zapdos EX, which can be actually, you're getting 2 Zapdos EXs in the deck. I wouldn't recommend putting 2 Zapdos in a Miraidon EX deck, but you do get a cool snipe attacker here as well. So I wouldn't necessarily say it's the most competitive combo, but it is a thing you can do. What I wouldn't recommend, though, is buying the Miraidon League Battle Deck alongside the Miraidon Deluxe Battle Deck, at least with the intent of mashing them together. Miraidon EX in the Deluxe Battle Deck is a Dragon-type Pokemon, and Miraidon EX from the League Battle Deck is a Lightning-type Pokemon, so there's no real synergy of having these Pokemon together, so I would not buy them together with the idea of mashing them into one deck. In the spring of 2023, Pokemon released the Gardevoir League Battle Deck. Now, Gardevoir is an incredibly strong archetype at the 2023 World Championships. It got all the way to Grand Finals and almost won the whole thing. And when people thought Gardevoir was going to fall off the face of the earth in 2024, it actually was arguably better than ever, and for a time earlier this year was considered the consensus best deck in the game. Gardevoir has an absolutely busted ability that lets it accelerate energy from the discard pile onto its attackers, and you've got some incredible attackers here, including Drifloon, which has the potential to swing for 300 damage in this current build if you have a different modifier like a Hero's Cape. Drifloon can one-hit KO anything in the game. You've got a cool snipe attacker in Cresselia, and even Mew EX can be a cool attacker as it copies attacks from your opponent's active Pokemon, and that could be incredibly powerful as well. Some of the strengths of Gardevoir EX is that this build is very competitive out of the box. I really like the mix of Pokemon and trainer cards that you get here. There are some notable missing cards, but we'll get to that in a sec. I think out of the box, the deck plays great, and if you are willing to upgrade it, Gardevoir is currently one of the strongest decks in the game, and I think it will continue to be one of the strongest decks in the game up until April 2025 when rotation hits. And Drifloon with the Bravery Charm can hit for 300 damage, and you can modify that even more, whether you get a Hero's Cape on a Drifloon to increase its HP, or you get cards like Monkey Dory, which can move damage from your Pokemon over to your opponent's Pokemon, and Drifloon becomes a one-hit KO machine. There are, however, some notable downsides to the Gardevoir League Battle Deck. I think that the biggest one is probably it's the hardest of the 4 decks to play. I've seen numerous complaints from new players who bought this League Battle Deck because I and others have said this is the best League Battle Deck, and we're like, oh, I keep losing with this deck, what's going on? And yeah, one of the big things is that it is one of the harder decks to play. in the hands of a skilled player, you can beat pretty much any deck in the game with Gardevoir EX, but there is a steep learning curve to it because there's a lot of potential attack lines, and it's also the slowest deck to set up. Unlike Miraidon, where you can attack on the first turn, oftentimes you're usually not attacking on the first turn, and sometimes you're not even attacking on the second turn, and that makes Gardevoir the slowest deck that we're going to look at here. It's an incredible deck for making comebacks, but just right out of the box, it's just inherently slow to set up relative to the other decks on this list. And then it's missing a few key pieces such as Screamtail for snipe damage, TM Evolution to get your deck set up faster, Buddy Puffin to get those basic Pokemon down. It does not have an A-Spec card in here like the other decks we've seen so far. Doesn't have Monkey Dory, which is great for moving damage. It's not the heaviest load in terms of like getting cards to completely build out your Gardevoir League battle deck, but it does require a little more upgrades than just being able to play it out of the box. I think out of the box, it's still really good, but if you wanted to get to that top tier level, you're still going to have to get like 10 to 20-ish cards to finish off the deck. A potential downside that no one's really talking about at this point in time is that Gardevoir is going to be losing some cards in the 2025 rotation. So you're looking at this list here. There is 11 cards going away, and there's some big ones going away. The Kirlia and the Radiant Greninja going away is a problem because you're losing Gardevoir's draw engine, and you're losing your way of discarding energy so that Gardevoir can power it up from the discard pile. And without those cards, I don't know what Gardevoir looks like. Now, keep in mind there is an upcoming Zoroark EX that does have the same ability as Kirlia, but I don't necessarily think it's just take out Kirlia and put Zoroark EX in there instead, and the deck is the same. It might be. That might be the way that people play it going forward, but I do think there are some question marks about Gardevoir that we don't have the answers to because we just haven't seen the cards that could fill that role of Kirlia or augmented the deck in a different way. If you're watching this towards the spring of 2025 and maybe the cards that will slot into Gardevoir have already shown themselves, then this might not be a problem. But in the immediate term, there are some question marks about how good Gardevoir will be after the following rotation. Here's an example of a competitive build I found in Japan with a lot of the core pieces you'll see in the League Battle deck here. A couple of additions. They've added a copy of Screamtail, a Flutter Mane to shut off abilities from your opponent's active Pokemon. We've also got the Mimikyu here to block damage from EXs and Vs, Manaphy to protect the bench, and an A-Spec here. We've got Unfair Stamp. It's not the hardest deck to fully upgrade, but you are missing a couple of core pieces that you'll definitely want to grab once you get the League Battle deck. If you're thinking to yourself, I want to buy the Gardevoir League Battle deck, you'll want to do it because you're getting a strong League Battle deck out of the box. Again, Gardevoir has an insane ability, and you got some really great attackers and support Pokemon in this deck. And you'll probably want to buy it if you want a deck with a high competitive ceiling, at least in the 2024 rotation, right? Gardevoir has consistently been a top tier deck, and for a time earlier this year in the Twilight Masquerade format, it was the best deck in the game. And I know there's going to be cards that I haven't seen yet that come out after the time of this recording that might change the meta a bit, but I have a hard time seeing Gardevoir fall out of the top tiers anytime soon, at least until the 2025 rotation. I would say, though, if you're looking for reasons to not buy Gardevoir, if the biggest one is going to be like, if you're looking for an easier deck to play, Gardevoir is not it. It does have a high skill ceiling, and in order to really get the most out of it, you're going to have to put in the time to learn the game and learn how Gardevoir works, because it is a trickier deck to play than most. It's not impossible. There are people who will learn on Gardevoir, and it's a ton of fun to play, and it's incredibly powerful, but just know that there is more of a learning curve to this deck than others. And if you've got concerns about what happens, like Gardevoir will still be legal past the 2025 rotation, but we don't quite know what's going to happen with Gardevoir at that point, with Kirlia going away, with Greninja going away. So you might want to wait to see what happens with Gardevoir, and if you have any sort of concerns, maybe wait till we see what happens in rotation to maybe pull the trigger on getting Gardevoir. The last one we're going to look at today is Charizard EX. This League Battle deck is actually not out yet at the time of this recording. It's in September. This deck will be out in November, But the word is out. We all know this deck is coming, and it looks fantastic. We are getting Charizard EX, which accelerates energy to itself, and it's one of the best attackers in the game. Its starting damage output is 180 damage, and if your opponent's taken 5 prizes, you are swinging for 330 damage, enough to one-hit KO almost everything in the game. And you're also getting Pidgeot here, which is one of the best draw engines in the game. Just lets you cherry pick a card from your deck, and there's just a really strong lineup of trainer cards here as well. The biggest addition to this deck is Prime Catcher, which is absolutely insane. At the time of this recording, Prime Catcher is about the same price as the entire League Battle deck. So there will be people who will buy this League Battle deck just to get that one card. And I already have a Charizard deck, but I'm buying it for the Prime Catcher and for access to a bunch of awesome training cards, having extra copies of Iono, Arven, Boss. Buddy Puffin is like weirdly kind of expensive as well. So a lot of great cards in this deck, even if you just need it for spare parts. And like really though, you want to play Charizard because Charizard is an incredible deck. As I've been gushing for the last few seconds, it's one of the strongest decks in the game. It has been pretty much since it came out last year, and I don't see that slowing down anytime soon. Charizard's damage scaling, being able to power itself up and get stronger as the match progresses, is just really hard for a lot of decks to deal with. And then Pidgeot being able to cherry pick cards from the deck make it incredibly consistent. On top of that, this is the only League Battle deck you can get right now that comes with an A-Spec. And not only does it come with an A-Spec, it comes with the best A-Spec and the most expensive A-Spec. And there are Charizard players who would prefer to play Charizard with Maximum Belt or Unfair Stamp, but like Prime Catcher in Charizard is amazing, and you can get those other A-Specs for way cheaper than Prime Catcher. So Prime Catcher in and of itself is going to make this deck worthwhile for certain players who might even already have a Charizard deck. If you are concerned about rotation, do not worry with this deck. None of the cards will rotate in March or April of 2025. You will have this deck for a solid, I mean, it depends on when you watch this, but like Charizard and Pidgeot do not rotate until March and April of 2026. So upwards of a year and a half to use this deck, which is fantastic. And then its difficulty, I'd say it's on the medium side. It can be a little tricky to get your Charizard and your Pidgeot set up, but once you get rolling, it's fantastic. There are a number of people who use this as their first deck, and they have no problem getting into the game from there. So don't be too concerned about how difficult this deck is to play. Here's the problem with Charizard, and this isn't going to be a problem forever, but it is a problem if you're playing between like when this comes out in November of 2024 to March or April of 2025. It's missing a lot of cards you see in competitive Charizard decks at the time of this recording. Stuff like Lumineon, Rotom, Radiant Charizard. All of these cards are standard in your competitive Charizard build. So everything over here. And they're not in the League Battle deck. And the reason they're not in the League Battle deck is that they're going away in a couple of months. And Pokemon is looking to sell this product beyond March and April of 2025. So they just said, we're not going to put these in there at all. And I totally respect that decision. And if you want to play this between November of 2024 to March/April of 2025, and March is when rotation happens in Pokemon TCG Live, and April is when rotation happens for in-person play. So that's why I make that distinction between those two time periods. Yeah, if you want to play it in those first couple of months, you'll want to spend the extra money on these cards, and they're grand total, like it's not that expensive to get all of these cards, but I know there are going to be people who don't want to buy cards that will be not legal in a couple of months, and that's going to be a sticking point for some. So maybe you don't want to buy this deck till after March, April 2025, at which point you don't have to worry yourself about buying cards that are going away in a couple of months. And then there's a couple of cards that are missing from this League Battle deck that are considered standard that aren't rotating. So stuff like Pheasantipede EX, Countercatcher, the Dusknoir line is an optional thing, but it's a really nice addition to the deck. Professor Turo Scenario. Most of these aren't that big of a deal. Pheasantipede at the time of this recording is kind of expensive, but I do see this coming down in price a little bit. So a couple of notable upgrades, but it's not that, I don't think the load, I think of the decks that are in this list, this one's the easiest one to upgrade, especially after March/April of 2025. Here's an example of a competitive list. This one is from Oscar Madsen, who got 35th at Worlds. It's not the highest placing Charizard at Worlds. That honor belongs to Tord Reklev, who got 10th. But I did want to show kind of a little more tricked out deck that has the Bibro line in here as well. It's also got the Dusknoir line. We've also got the Pheasantipity, Luminion, Rotom. So a couple of the additional pieces that you would see in a competitive Charizard build in 2024. Again, in 2025, we don't know the exact builds of what they will look like post-rotation, but I think that you are going to get pretty much all of the foundational pieces that you would want in the League Battle deck right away. I think this Charizard deck is absolutely phenomenal, and I'd argue that this is the best League Battle deck ever printed. I think there are people that are going to say, oh, it's actually Mew VMAX because Mew VMAX won the World Championships. Charizard hasn't won Worlds yet. But I think just in terms of completeness and power level and the fact that this has a Prime Catcher in it makes this deck absolutely phenomenal. And we're also getting Charizard near the peak of its powers, and it's going to be strong. It's probably going to be strong going forward as well. And if you want a deck with a high competitive ceiling, again, this is a top tier deck right now, and I have a hard time seeing it falling any lower than like A tier in the immediate term. This is going to be a really strong deck for the foreseeable future. And if you want a Prime Catcher, right, there are people with the prices being what they are right now. Prime Catcher in and of itself is sometimes even more expensive than buying the entire League Battle deck. So if you're just looking for a Prime Catcher, and a lot of decks are and a lot of players are, you might just want to buy this League Battle deck and get the Prime Catcher plus a whole bunch of other good cards you can use elsewhere. So that's actually what I did. I foresee Prime Catcher will probably go down in price a little bit once the League Battle deck comes out. So in that way, it kind of benefits everyone. But regardless, I think this deck is absolutely phenomenal. The only major consideration here is that you will, if you're going to play this between November of 2024 and March/April 2025, you're going to be buying some cards to upgrade it that will be illegal. They'll rotate out of standard in a couple of months. And I know there are some people who don't like buying cards that will not be usable in a couple of months. So that's something to keep in mind if you're looking to play Charizard, at least in the immediate term. After March/April 2025, then you're buying cards that will last longer. Here's how I would rank these decks in order. I think Charizard is at this point, the clear front runner for deck you should pick up at this point. I think this is, yeah, again, the best League Battle deck ever made. Just the Prime Catcher alone here being more expensive and just an absolutely phenomenal card paired with arguably the best deck in the game makes this a ridiculous value. So of these decks, Charizard easily the one to get. I think Gardevoir is a really good option as well. You are going to have to do some legwork to get that to work right now. I do have concerns about it long term with Curly and Greninja going away, but last year we also had concerns about Gardevoir in rotation, and Gardevoir came through with flying colors. It remains to be seen. I don't see it moving out of second place until we start seeing some new League Battle decks, which we won't until spring next year. Miraidon is in third. I actually think this one is arguably the most work, at least the most expensive one to upgrade, but Miraidon is going to survive the 2025 rotation, and if you're willing to upgrade it, you are still getting a really fast, aggressive, easy to play deck, and when you upgrade it, have a deck that can defy the odds and potentially win anywhere it goes. And then last but not technically least, Palkia VSTAR, which I have a hard time recommending to anyone at this point because it's going to rotate in a couple of months, especially for new players where you're just looking for a deck to learn and play, and you probably want it to last longer than a couple of months. But there will be competitive players who are okay with this deck going away in a couple of months. Maybe you'll just invest $30 in this, and then if you win a regionals or something and you make thousands of dollars, then you don't really care that it's going away in a couple of months. So that's how I would rank them. And again, because of the potential power level of Palkia when you fully upgrade it, I'm reluctant to say just don't buy this, because there are cases where you'll want to buy Palkia and make the effort to upgrade it, and you might just really like that playstyle and you could win a whole bunch and cover the cost of that, and then you're not worried about the $30 investment going away in a couple of months. So those are my thoughts. All of these are strong decks. Charizard, the best one. Gardevoir, also really strong, but I have some concerns about how it's going to work long term. It'll probably be fine, but we just don't know yet. Miraidon is a great deck if you're willing to put in the money and the effort to upgrade it all the way. And in the short term, Palkia could be a really cool and powerful deck, but long term, it's just not going to hang around that much longer. And there we go. That is an updated look at the marketplace for League Battle decks. We've got 4 in the market right now. The next time I do this video, Palkia will probably be off this list because it is rotating, and then we'll probably add in whatever the spring 2025 League Battle deck is for consideration. So I hope this video helps. I hope I didn't ramble too much, and I hope I gave you the information you need to make an informed choice, whichever of these decks you plan on getting. And maybe you don't. Maybe you just decide you're going to buy single cards, or maybe get a lower play level deck like the level 2 deluxe battle decks or an EX deck to start. But wherever you go, I wish you all of the best in your Pokemon TCG journey. For now, though, I got to get going. Thank you so much for watching. You can find me on all the things: YouTube, TikTok, Twitter, and Instagram at @InThirdPerson. You can find me on Twitch at @InThirdPerson, where I stream the Pokemon trading card game every Sunday at 10 a.m. Eastern Time. And check out the website, inthirdperson.com, for more articles and videos on video games, board games, and other nerdy pursuits. So until the next one, I'll see you later. Bye-bye.